Welcome to the colony. It's 3 generations of nerdy guys talking about stuff. And today's stuff, we're going to be talking about a reality, if you will, that has horizontals and verticals. You may even lose your control or get lifted up. These are all kinds of weapons: kinetic, control, and fire. Take it away, guys.
Yeah, welcome to the colony.
Hmm.
Yeah, today we're talking about archetypes and general design classifications, specifically ones that inspired us or ones that we appreciate.
Sorry, was it a little over the top?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good. I'll try harder next time.
Um, yeah, I'll say growing up, watching BattleBots on TV, I got a pretty good sense of like all the different archetypes, and one of my favorites was anything overhead, whether that was a hammer saw, a hammer, or even like to some extent crushers and grabbers. I remember growing up, one of my favorite robots was Chomp, and the other one was Sawblaze. Um, and just watching them, shred into people's like top panels, hit all the juicy bits on the top. I always really loved watching that. I mean, it makes for good TV, it makes for good viewing, but it's also a very respectable and legitimate way to win a fight.
Yeah, I
Um,
I remember seeing Overhaul versus Sawblaze and just JMO coming down on Charles. Jameson Go drives Sawblaze. Charles Guan drives Overhaul. Overhaul. Speaking of the different archetypes, Overhaul is both a lifter. It has a bottom jaw and a grabber. So the idea is it will grab you on top and then it will kind of bring you over. Sawblaze being an overhead saw slash hammer saw robot. It has uh, an a encapsulating front end meant to kind of corral you and get you under their control. And then he has an arm that sits from behind, so that way it's protected. And it comes over top, and it comes right down on the softer bits that people generally don't armor up. And JMO will run sometimes a circular saw meant to cut through, or he'll run a more traditional vertical disc with a single tooth meant to deliver maximum impact forces into the top of your robot in hopes of either going through or sending enough shock that it kills certain aspects of the robot. And just seeing him cut through Overhaul's arm like that was insane for the time too.
oh yeah. And nowadays, we're starting to see a big transition towards that more kinetic hammer saw, more of a biting action as opposed to a slicing. As people are starting to use a lot more like titanium and steel on their top plate, it's becoming almost impossible to actually slice through. But instead being able to bite, almost hit your way through with like a hammer saw, it's becoming a lot more feasible. But there's also a bit of a counter movement happening in the 3 pound weight class with this robot called Mako, which is found like the perfect via media in between and literally cuts through anything that you might have on top of your robot. He's fine tuned it. So this is Julian Papazian, amazing guy, terrifying builder. Yeah, he amazing, but uh, he's found this style of saw blade that works really well on his robot. That you'll see people try softer top plates, you'll see people try harder top plates, you'll see people try to put saw blades on top of their top plate, and it he slices through whatever you put on there.
Has,
Um,
has anybody tried titanium?
oh yeah.
He
Um,
saws through titanium.
Oh
mhm.
yeah. I think
He loves titanium.
2 or 3 mil titanium, he
Yeah.
goes right through. Julian is a very humble person
Oh yeah.
where he'll just stand there. He's like, "Hey, what's going on? I love your robot." And then when you're in the cage, he's like, "I'm going through your top plate. I don't care."
Yeah,
Uh,
well, that I thought I had something going on with my quarter, half mil. Titanium. I was feeling pretty good about that until about 30 seconds ago.
And then
Crap.
on the opposite spectrum of overhead attack robots, there's also Sean out in California. He has a robot called Strike Point, which instead of using the circular saw, he has the single tooth that he'll spin as fast as he can and just slam it into your top, delivering maximum force into your robot and or going through your top plate because of the amount of force that it will generate. And Strike Point is no joke, just like Mako is. They're
Yeah.
hitting all the juicy bits that people don't armor.
Well, you can't forget about another very formidable overhead attack bot, the Power of Friendship.
Yes, it's a very non-traditional overhead, but it's
Little drill bits.
Kokoto
Yeah.
has done wonders. He has even hit a battery.
Yeah.
It's awesome to see that archetype that no one's really pushed, and it's menacing too because at Norwalk, if you're 2 pounds, sorry, let me back up. In the 3 pound weight class, if you run two identical weight robots, they allow you for 1 extra pound, but both robots still have to be the same. So Kokoto has two identical 2 pound robots, and when they're both in there together, they're very menacing. And like I said, a lot of people run plastic on their top plate, not thinking the drill is going through. Well, no, he
Yeah, it's
has
just
drilled through.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little drill bit on like a small drone motor,
Yes.
so and that's it. And I have a special place for small weapons in my heart that are effective. It's just that it's cool.
Corey
Because,
doesn't.
no, Corey doesn't. Well, I kind of, yeah, because I mean, I'm of the, you know, I kind of like seeing it going the other way with, like, uh, a robot with a smaller weapon or like a non-traditional, like a grabber, flipper, anything like that, taking the win is so much more of a testament to the driving,
Yeah, absolutely.
than just having, just being able to, because I think having a big weapon, and I think Corey, you can attest to that because people forgot you can actually drive, and it's not just this big menacing weapon you got to get around. Well, there's somebody on the other end that has to position that weapon,
Absolutely.
and that can be kind of, I think, a whole nother form of just insanity because you're like doing stuff with gyroscopic forces that you shouldn't. How do you
Um,
make that happen?
Yeah.
once we get to the vert section, we'll talk about it. But just two other overheads that I really like to touch on. At the teams event, it was the first time I had ever seen this implemented. There's a robot called Colossal Avian. It's in the 30 pound weight class. Um, they have 4-wheel drive, hammer saw. The one interesting about thing about them is control. It's a hammer saw control bot first, so they want to really get you under control. They ran long metal forks, but what made it interesting was they had these little, almost like printed stoppers, and they were able to effectively figure out how far your weapon reached, so they could plan and move them according. So that way, it was like a keep away hand to where you couldn't hit them, but their arm could still come down on top of you. Um, there's I'm even skipping over Liam. He has Bumble Blitz in the 12 pound weight class, and Liam is the only person to ever really fully hit Slam Plan's chassis. But even then, not to take away, Liam King has done wonders with that hammer saw.
Yeah.
And not to take up too much time, Jameson Go. He, in addition to the heavyweight, he has Megatron, which is the original hammer saw, and that thing's menace.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one other oddball that I'll put in there for your consideration would be Buffalo Wings because of his new
Yes.
rotation.
Yeah.
It actually comes in more like this, or kind of actually more like
Yeah,
so. It's not quite overhead, and it's not. It's kind of a that motion.
I think it's a combination of it's hitting you where you don't want it to, and also I believe when it is oh my god, what I'm drawing a blank. What's his name? The
Eli.
driver. Eli. When Eli is upside down, the angle of the arms allow him to self-right and get back over onto the shufflers.
Yeah, it's a fun bot.
Yeah. For those who aren't familiar, Hot Wings was originally a robot that would effectively go and hug you from the sides, and each arm had little I believe he used like diesel ignition plugs. I could be wrong.
Yeah, they're diesel glow plugs.
Yeah. And it would melt through plastic side armor, but then people just started using metal on their sides and they were fine. So he ended up evolving the design to make um Buffalo Wings, which I do believe of the robots with butts on them, I believe it's the largest. And it would attack you at this really weird um not quite overhead, not quite around the side. It was like an angle, and that thing did melt things. It was pretty scary.
You could
Yeah.
say you could say he had a spicy butt because that's where he put his batteries.
Uh, I won't tell you where his turn on stick goes.
But you get the idea.
Yeah, oh yeah.
As far as other non-traditional type robots, there's also control bots, which are fun, but control bots more of an umbrella. There's grabbers. Going into February NHRL, there's a robot called Slamson, which is Slammo at the 30 pounds. The idea is he has claws in the front, and then he brings you over and suplexes you. And the idea is he wants to get you on your head.
Yeah.
Yep. For some
What up?
robots, that's an issue.
What other control bots do you guys think of when you think of control bots?
You
This is
know,
a
go ahead.
this is a weird one that I think about. Actually, I guess two of them from earlier BattleBots days. I think of season one Overdrive. Just blue robot, big black lifting wedge on the front, and it was so hard to drive against. This was Christian Karlberg, who is legitimately one of the first builders in combat robotics. And this was, I remember watching this thing just pushing Chomp, the older Crusher bot, around the arena. And it was amazing. I was just so impressed with how his robot doesn't do anything to them, but they can't do anything to him, so he's winning. And then the other one that I'll just quickly touch upon would be Complete Control. Another classic design that can pick you up and then burn you. And I remember watching that thing.
Exactly. How does it take you up and burn you? I forgot how that works.
He has it's not a full-size suplexer. It picks you up at around a 90-degree angle. It is a claw, bites down, picks you up, and then on his arm, he has a flamethrower. And it spits out hot butane. I don't know if you ever watched the Bombshell versus Complete Control fight, but that was the only time I believe flamethrowers have ever been an effective weapon at the heavyweight scale.
Yeah, so Mike effectively, like Mitch was saying, this is the top arm, this is the bottom arm, and then right where the two pivots are, there was an opening that the flames would just shoot straight out. So when they grabbed Bombshell, grabbed him like this, and then held him straight up, and then the flames went straight through into Bombshell.
I'm kind of remembering it now.
Yeah. Almost looked like a Searsall. Just toasting it.
Yeah. And then one of the scariest control bots and battle bots. Well, they think they're a control bot. No, they think they're not a control bot. Quantum, the crusher that
Oh
goes
yeah.
through everything.
and they're so beautiful.
Absolutely.
It
If you don't get a chance to see them, Quantum, it looks, what is it, like a huge dinosaur, a dragon head?
They said
So
that they refuse to give it an animal identity. It's a thing of its own.
Yeah, they wanted to make it animalistic, but at the same time, they didn't want to classify it as to what animal it is because it's kind of its own thing.
That's the
Um,
only robot I think I've ever seen bite through like genuine thick AR
yeah,
easily.
blacksmith. Blacksmith
Yeah.
had the what, the 1/4 inch AR that it just popped
Yeah.
right through like nothing.
Mhm.
And then kind of and then you get hammers and like you get shatter, you get
Mhm.
Beta,
yeah.
do a lot of blunt force action
Oh my
going
God.
down.
We have forgotten all about our full body spinners,
Oh,
our melties. Oh my God, there's a whole section of the community that would hate on us.
oh, don't worry.
We'll get there.
We're just getting started. Um, of course, there are a lot of other robots that we aren't touching on. We're just kind of giving a broad spectrum of everything, so it's not too much to
Mhm.
digest.
Yeah.
For robots, there's two approaches. There's a defensive and an offensive. Defensive would be trying to control your robot and use their energy against them. Offensive, a lot of people will utilize something called the kinetic energy weapon. You take your weapon, depending on what it is, and you spin it up really fast. And what will happen is that will store a lot of energy. And then the idea is you take that energy that's being stored and you will send it into your opponent. And based on what type of weapon it is, will determine and dictate what type of action it will be, whether it's a cutting, a blunt force, um, a throwing action. Um, there are two different types of two basic types of kinetic energy weapons. There's horizontal, the orientation or the plane that it spins on is horizontal, and then there's vertically spinning weapons. There, the orientation is spinning vertically. As you can see, Mitch has his robot, which is a vertical spinner. Um,
So I'll generally move my bot forward, and then this would be spinning at like I think tip speed of 212 miles an hour. Um, and I bite in, and this blade that I have, it'll bite under, and I tend to get a bit more of a throwing action. So I'll generally throw whoever I'm hitting like high up. I've even had someone hit the ceiling once. It's quite fun to do that.
Corey's
And
like,
it's
that's nice once.
um
um,
vertical spinners are generally considered to be the meta of combat robotics, the min-maxing, if you will. I'm not going to say all, most of the robots that are doing really well, to some extent, are some variation of the vertical spinner. But there's so many different kinds of vertical spinners. There's not just there's discs, bars, drums, big verts, small verts, control bot verts, like what Michael has.
Yeah, Drisks.
You put them on an arm. There's not one way
um,
to do the vertical spinner.
I think the reason why the vert is as effective as it is because if you think of physics, equal and opposite reactions, when a vert is imparting its force into the opponent, the general direction is it will spin upwards. So as it's hitting the opponent from underneath, and it's sending the opponent up.
Yeah,
If you think about equal and opposite, the opponent is going up. So your robot, in theory, will go down. However, if you're on the floor, so you can't go down. So effectively, your robot is planting itself. So you're effectively transferring a lot more energy than hypothetical horizontal, where the opponent will go one way, your robot will go the other way. So you're not transferring as much. But when we get to horizontals, we can touch on that.
not to get too nerdy with the physics here. but as the intro said, we are three nerds. Um, the other thing about a vertical spinner is that, for example, if you have any other kind of spinner, when you move into your opponent, there's kind of that toss. And as great as that toss is, the moving of the actual opponent, that's not damage that's being transferred into the actual um hit, if you will. And that it's the kinetic energy is being put into launching the robot as opposed to actually um damaging. When you have a vertical spinner, you're actually acting against gravity. So you're much more likely to get a better bite and more kinetic energy transferred in. That's why you see vertical spinners hitting just as hard as any other kind of spinner that'll just like ram into you because it's almost gravity holding you there in that there is a slow-mo style biting.
And then kind of feeding off of that, your action will be dictated based on your design.
Mhm.
For example, there's a weapon type called the beater bar. Not a Peter bar, a beater bar. It's effectively it has two vertical aspects, and then it has the impactor that's a bar that's out on the farthest end. The farther away you can put the weight, the the harder you're going to the more energy you store. So beater bars generally will do like a throwing action because they're hitting with such a large paddle. I mean, granted, you hit something hard enough, it will break it. Whereas
Yeah.
something more like synthesis, it's meant to have a thinner blade, so when it hits, it's hitting hard, but it's effectively like a knife through butter. It's concentrating so much force on that one small area rather than a big paddle. It will usually go through whatever it's hitting if it's not tossing.
Mhm. Mike, want to talk
Yeah.
about drums?
Do I want to talk about drums? Do I have a drum? Um,
You're the
no,
closest.
huh?
You're the closest to us to having a drum.
Yeah,
So to preface this, Synthesis's disc is significantly larger than the wheelbase. Something like a drum, you can get it larger than the wheelbase. However, generally, something like Minotaur, it's pushed a lot smaller, so it sits within the wheelbase. We have Stag Beetlebot. It does use a disc, but it sits within the wheelbase, so it can act in part like a drum. Mike, you want to talk about Stag and kind of the
yeah,
weapon choices and design?
it's been kind of cool because, like, as most people say, like Corey said, even there's two basic horizontal and verticals, things like that, control bots. And control bots generally have like lifters or something to that effect. So I put in the drum because I wanted to be able to do some some damage because, well, damage is more or less king. you know. Um but this has been turning it at a really high rate, and it's got really small. Let's see if you can bring this in. It's like wicked tiny, but they are sharp. Well, that one got some serious battle damage. This one's a little sharper. Um, and it will, at the speed that it goes at, um, and the angles and stuff, it just chews through it. It doesn't deliver that big hit because it doesn't really have enough, I think, surface area to deliver that kind of hit, but it has enough surface area to just start going at it like a can opener and just start going right through it. And that's good too. Because, then generally speaking, another builder knows when it's been in a match with my robot. Because it's the only one that like leaves these gaping like little teeth marks in it, which was kind of another thing that I wanted to do. But with the drums, I kind of feel like the Driss compared to the beater bar, um, you get a different kind of engagement. This was, starting to chew through them and stuff. The beater bar was popping up my opponents. It was doing some damage, but there was only like these little teeth. So I don't feel like the amount of engagement that I was getting was like doing the amount of damage I want, but it could have also tied into the size motor I had. And I just wasn't delivering enough force behind it, or I didn't have my ESC programmed because there's a whole lot to go in. I mean, even though you can choose whatever weapon you want, but if your electronics behind it isn't solid, it's not going to do much, and I think that it was a big lesson from going through the different types of weapons from the hub motor. Well, it was a hub motor, but it wasn't really rated for what I was using it for. It was an ant weight hub. So, and it was in the front of my robot. And so as I'm like trying to be a control bot, because I kind of feel like I'm trying to do a little bit more of a hybrid, of a controlled damage bot, kind of more in that order. That little hub drum was right out there in the middle, and I was just boom, and I was losing a motor a match. Now at $30 a motor, 8 matches a day, no, that's just too much. So that's when I decided to take the motor and move it in and get away from the hub and then start using bars. And I've been experimenting with bars. And this one is for this version. Next version, it's going to have I'm going to go to a single blade and larger so I can get some of that engagement like Mitch gets where he pops them up, because I want to more pop them up than chew them up. And
Right.
yeah.
Mitch, do you have anything else before we dive into the horizontals?
I think we've just about covered it. I mean, vertical spinners, they're the meta of combat robotics. They're what win because they've time and time after they keep winning. Um, but we're starting to see, especially now, I guess another type. I mean, this type of spinner has probably existed longer than the vertical has, but the horizontal spinner in recent years has become almost as dominant. And effectively, what a horizontal spinner is, you have a vertical spinner, it spins like this, where your axle is going along the robot. A horizontal spinner actually spins with your axle pointing upwards. And so it's almost more of a reach around type engagement. And that leads oftentimes for bigger weapons, very big hits. And if a horizontal hits a vertical spinner the wrong way, the horizontal spinner goes up.
Yeah. One of the issues horizontals experience is kind of having that traction to resist the want to kind of fly. Like you watch like Tombstone is one of the most memorable horizontals, has the blade in the center, pushed out front, two-wheel drive. When it hits something, it will transfer its energy into the opponent. The opponent will go the direction the blade is spinning, but you'll also see Tombstone bounce away in the opposite direction just because of that equal and opposite reaction. And unless you can counteract that and add extra grip, whether it's down force through magnets or something like a cleat that will dig into the floor as it's impacting, you're not really transferring all of that shock. Um, One of the most memorable horizontals I can think of recently, that's Beast, is a robot called Chunky. It's from the Georgia Tech guys and gals and folks. Um, it's called a shell spinner. It spins horizontal, but what makes it special is, in addition to the weapon spinning horizontal, that's the armor. So the whole outer shell of the robot is spinning as armor. and a way to benefit the robot to have it stay more planted. It's a shuffler, so it uses no wheels. Uses a cam walking mechanism, so it's allowed to weigh an extra 15 pounds in the 30-pound weight class. And having that added weight plus the design in the feet allow it to stay planted as it's hitting things. And it may not spin fast, but it has so much stored energy as it's coming around, it's able to really impart it into your opponent.
Yeah, speaking of crazy like horizontals, right? Let's talk about the melties of like the greatest challenge and like Project
Project
Lift.
Liftoff.
I mean, they figured out how to take their 3 pounds and basically weaponize all of it, you know. And one of the most distinct things I'll say um about Project Liftoff is the sound it makes. It for those of you who don't know, the melty brain is just most of the times it can be in different shapes, but most of the time it's just like a frisbee, and with some sort of like a little appendage on it that's a weapon, and a couple of motors in the middle. Spins at a high rate of speed, and getting that death frisbee to maneuver properly is a feat of engineering wizardry. And
Uh,
so having it done and making it all as stable and everything, it is vicious because you see it bouncing around like hockey pucks. And
do
just
we
to be
want
able to withstand that.
do we want to touch base on what a melty is, Mitch or Mike, if
Sure,
you feel comfortable?
I can touch base on this. So, a melty brain is effectively a robot that does damage. It is by spinning itself. The whole robot is the weapon. It spins itself around in a circle. And there's some crazy math, some crazy code. You have to use accelerometers and gyroscopes to basically spin that robot around at a super high speed in a manner that you can actually move in different directions as you're spinning around. It's the wheels that are that are spinning you. So you only have two motors, so mechanically it's a very simple robot. Electronically, it gets very complicated. But the benefit of that is you have the entire mass, the entire weight of your robot is your weapon weight. So you store a ton of kinetic energy. And it is chaotic. And as Michael said, very loud.
Yeah. So it's definitely interesting the different approaches that people take with the horizontals.
Yeah. And
If
I
you
mean,
guys have
we
do you
talked
guys
about
have any
so many different designs today, but
yeah.
like there's so many more that people have been experimenting with, these archetypes. We probably talked about, less than half of the actual, styles that people use.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting seeing how everyone has their own unique approach to each of these kind of base designs. And yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys for coming to hang out with us three nerds, and we'll
yeah,
catch you on the next one.
that's it.
Yep. We three nerds of the internet.